Welcome back to the channel. I'm King Wabi. I'm here joined by Max. And today we're going to talk about Solana and the prospects of Solana going into the next cycle. Now, one thing that myself and Max have been using as a framework to go into the next cycle is comparing some of these altcoins, the tokens that ran in the cycle beforehand, specifically 2017. Now, Max, go ahead and show us some of the charts, man. Let's dive deep into them.
All right, let's do it. All right, so on the left we have Solana currently, and on the right we have Neo. So we can do a little bit of TA on them. And I mean, look, of course, it's a different project, but a lot of altcoin charts end up taking similar fashion, where in a way they do sort of a Burj Khalifa pattern, or Christmas tree or whatever, and they come back down. But that's not necessarily a death sentence for altcoins. It depends on a wide variety of things, and um, it's hard not to notice some of the similarities, specifically between Solana and Neo, just from a purely technical perspective. And we'll get into some of the fundamentals and
Yeah.
community aspects and things like that, which probably I would argue matter a little bit more with something like this. And even from these levels, right? Let's just assume that potentially, hypothetically, Solana is somewhere, in the Neo accumulation phase before that pump. I mean, this was an amazing pump, right? It didn't necessarily go on to make a new all-time high, but if you take a measured move from really anywhere within, let's just go right, some kind of right in the middle of this accumulation zone to the high, it ran 1,300, 1,400%. So if Solana did something comparable to that, and it'll never be exact, right in the middle here, somewhere maybe above this green line, I suppose 13, 1,400 would take us to a new high, but somewhere up in here, this is still an 8 or 9x from here. So anyways, I'll leave it at that for now, just doing a little bit of framing before we get into the discussion here. But anyways, point being is this is potentially a major accumulation phase for Solana, one that could lead to serious expansion going into the April 2024 halving for Bitcoin.
And what I also noticed between Solana and Neo is that during both of their bull markets, they both came on as this new exciting project, right? So Neo came onto the scene as the smart economy blockchain, and then we look at Solana right now, and they actually have something that's tangible, right? They have their phone. They're still active development. You have Anatoly going into all these conferences, and I kind of think it's sort of piggybacking off of what Neo wanted to do, right? When Solana came onto the scene, it's like this new smart contract platform built on Rust. It's going to be the ETH killer. Everyone was on it, and it really had that cult sensation that Neo had. But I think the key differences here is that as you're saying, we're in this accumulation range. By the time Neo reached that accumulation range, people just gave up on it. Whereas with Solana, people are still pretty active within the community, and like you said, some fundamentals might play a huge part in it, right? And oddly enough, Neo actually had some projects building on top of it as well. So, they had something called Red Pulse, right? They had something called the Trinity Network credits, and I can't help but compare that also to what Solana had, right? With something like a Serum or a Radium, right? But I think the key difference is that Solana really debuted at a time where people started to interact with this technology, right? By the time Solana came onto the scene, people were using Uniswap, they were going on Aave and Maker, taking out loans and all that stuff. Whereas Neo, it kind of debuted in the most speculative time frame in crypto's history, right? Neo came out, I believe, like a little over a year after Ethereum when it debuted as Ant shares, and so it was really just like let's just throw a dart on the board and let's see what sticks and let's see what doesn't. And so I kind of think like Neo might have been too early for its time, but think that Solana might piggyback off of it, and it might be the contender, to be that third altcoin, right? People like to say, oh, just dollar cost averages the Bitcoin, Ethereum, but I think not this cycle, but the cycle after, Solana might be that third asset, given and should it survive this time period and go on to take certain highs in the next bull market.
And I can appreciate that the Solana community, even despite all the FUD and SBF and FTX going down, they're still committed to their chain. They're still committed to their project, and they're still building. And I'm definitely an optimist when it comes to Solana. I do think it will pump again because people are still using it. And for better or for worse, depending on maybe who the investor is that's listening to this video, they've got a really solid NFT community. And I know some people meme it and they say, oh, they're cheap NFTs. And it's like, the discount NFTs compared to Ethereum. But nonetheless, there's a lot of really solid communities on there, and they're still committed to it. But one thing I would like to mention, so just from a technical perspective, this is interesting. So I think at a minimum, I would prospect Solana potentially doing something like this. It's going to go back to 3 digits, in my opinion. Maybe it goes to $200, maybe a little bit short. But there's also a much more bullish case that I was entertaining a long time ago. And Solana's chart and price action actually looks somewhat comparable to Ethereum Wabi. I don't know if you've ever seen them side
Yeah,
by side.
the 2019 fractal. And what's crazy enough, Max, is that from yearly open to Solana's yearly high, it almost did the exact same move that Ethereum did. Solana went from about $8 to about 26, 27, 28, and Ethereum went from about $80 at its low in December of 2018, and 6 months after, it went to close to $400. I think it went to like 360, 370-ish around that time frame. So from a percentage basis, pretty much almost the exact same move. Albeit Solana did make that move a lot quicker. I think most of Solana's run up happened in Q1, and after that, it's just been in higher time frame distribution. Honestly.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was huge. I mean, really explosive move. But this is strikingly similar too. So the big question is, does come back in a big way and compete with something like Ethereum, or does it end up becoming sort of like a Neo, where it pumps but
Yeah.
doesn't really go on to do a whole lot besides just that, which is pumping. So it's interesting. It's interesting to think about, but I mean, I see a lot of a lot of striking similarities here,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's never going to be perfect, right?
Yeah.
But just kind of this whole like consolidation right here and then breakout, maybe sold us something like this, and then starts climbing and does what Ethereum did. And I can put them both in log mode, just we can have some fun with it. Never hurt anybody to have a little fun, some dubious speculation, right? But here,
Dubious.
we'll get these out of here and we'll put it in log mode so we can see that if ETH does basically what Solana did. And I know we're not necessarily here to compare the two, right? But I think it's perfect to discuss, what the bearish scenario for it could be, and then also maybe the bullish one. But these look so similar, in my opinion, man. Like, look at this price action, even down to the very early days, right over here. Crazy, crazy, crazy.
I think another similarity that we can also make, Max, is that during the pre-halving year, it was tokens built on these platforms that went on, to make its platform one of the highest gainers, right? So in 2019, we had Chainlink, right? We had other DeFi tokens, and those were built on ETH, and really made the case for Ethereum, surviving that bear market. And then, this year we've had tokens that started off on Solana, right? Like Rollbit, that have gone on to become one of the highest gainers. And of course, there are some like other tickers that I won't mention here, but they've done pretty well, right? And I think that gives a case for Solana kind of repeating history for what Ethereum did during the last bear market, right? Where it was really like, the tech stack that showed everyone like, all right, it survived the belly of the beast, right? Which was the bottom. And it thrived off of that bottom and went on to, make that next wave of innovation, right? And as we all know, when a bull market eventually does come back, we will see fees on Ethereum skyrocket to five, six, seven, $800. A few months ago,
Mhm.
Max, when we were dabbling on Pepe and some of these other on-chain tokens, dude, fees on ETH were 300-400 bucks, right?
Mhm.
So where are people, average individual, going to go once that happens, right? Because if we're being honest, people want things that are simple and direct. So if they have a phone that they can access all of these apps, they're going to go to the least path of resistance, the easiest things to access. And I think Solana is going to be a front runner to that, right? Although I'm not saying that, the Solana phone is going to be the next iPhone or whatever, but I think it's going to create a narrative to the demand that people are going to want over the next 5, 10, 15 years when it comes to the cryptocurrency market.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, Solana's fast, it's cheap, and it's easy to onboard people. They have things like Phantom. Wallet is,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's super easy and friendly, and it's great. It's a really great experience. So I'm willing to take a bet on them. I really am. And I just see so many similarities where even if it doesn't do this, in my opinion, worst case scenario, we come up to $150 per Solana and we pull a Neo.
Yeah.
Best case scenario, they pull it together. They manage to actually, steal a lot of market share and interest from Ethereum, and they do something comparable to what the Ethereum fractal did during the, right after the Litecoin halving in 2020. So again, this is right, but you can definitely see the similarities here. It's not that difficult to see. But of course, a lot of charts end up looking somewhat like this, or somewhat like, if we throw Neo on here too. Let's throw Neo on here. And they end up looking, they all look similar, but it's just a matter of, what they're able to accomplish and
Yeah.
actually pull off. So we'll see if it actually ends up doing it. Because of course it could do the ETH fractal, or it gets stuffed at the green line. So we'll see.
Yeah, and during that cycle with Neo, there were also tokens like Monero and Dash, and right, and Monero and Litecoin ended up doing a double top, right? So perhaps Sol could even do something like a Monero, right, where it sort of overextends based on the Neo fractal. Because I think the difference between Neo and Solana is that, again, like by the time we were at that time point where we were at the second half of the pre-halving year, Neo was practically dead. Like there was no social sentiment, no social activity. Crypto Twitter was a wasteland, and I think that is honestly like the difference between Sol and Neo. It comes down to a fundamental basis, and I wouldn't even be able to tell you like what Neo did in the last cycle. I think they tried coming out with like a DeFi platform, and that was during like shortly before the Coinbase IPO. And that was when Neo put in that complacency shoulder, and you had things like EOS and all those other 2017 tokens put in their macro high lower high, right?
Yeah.
I think that is the biggest difference between where we are now, right? Time of recording this video is September of 2023, right? If we were to circle all the way back 4 years ago, September 2019, Neo was like, oh, like it's still alive, right? But
Mm-hmm.
with Solana, there's still some activity on there, right? You still have some products building on top of it, right? You still have the developer community, and really the Solana enthusiast be pretty loud, right? So I would even go as far as to say, as from a social perspective, right? Because we've talked about price, but from a social sentiment, from a community sentiment, I would even say maybe like Solana can pull off a Cardano, right? Because Max, I'm sure, and as well as myself, right, with in-person friends, right, they're still talking about Sol, right? Like people
Yeah.
in real life outside of our crypto or our crypto X bubble, they're still making some noise about Solana, right?
But
Like,
Wabi, let me ask you a question though about that. So I think Solana could definitely be a good performer next cycle. And if it does something like the ETH fractal that we have pulled up here, I mean, you're talking about generational wealth from not that large of an investment. If you could buy Solana at $10 again and it goes to 700 or 800 bucks and, really competes with Ethereum, what are we really talking about here? I mean, that's unbelievable. Assuming maybe that doesn't happen, right? I think it's a non-zero probability, but it's not super likely. Does it really make sense to have that large of an allocation into something like Solana when you've got a lot of new projects that haven't had a cycle yet, that are just starting to launch and showing a lot of promise?
that is an interesting point, man. And history would tell us that's usually the ones with fresh charts that do go on to outperform. But at the same time period, right, when you look at something, like a Cardano, again, this is all speculation, right? But when you look at something in a pre-halving year like a Cardano, right, from a social sentiment, that's really the closest thing that I can compare Solana to, right? So as far as like allocation wise, I really wouldn't bet the farm, right? At this stage in the cycle, usually projects that aren't going to make it to the next cycle, the noise tends to fizzle out. So at this point, as far as heavy allocation, Ethereum is still right next to Bitcoin. But if you think Ethereum fees are gonna skyrocket and people are gonna go to what they know, right, where they go to when ETH fees are that high, it's typically like an L1, and I think it's going to be Solana, given that all the other layer ones, right? I won't name any names here, but they're pretty much completely dead. Like it's the same handful of individuals that are active on those chains, and I I'm willing to take that bet, right, when Solana does inevitably bleed more against Bitcoin further on into the year. I think Sol will surprise a lot of people. Given this year, right, in 2023, you've had multiple products go on to absolutely melt faces, and I think inevitably all that value and attention circles back, to the giver of those products, to the giver of that platform. And I think it definitely has to be Solana. But as history would indicate, fresh charts always outperform. However, there are many fresh charts that do go on to rug a lot of individuals, as me and you have experienced, right? We saw in 2020, 2021, a lot of these DeFi tokens, they rugged in the middle of a bull run, right? And I think people do have to be cautious, right? Like you have to understand that when you bid these fresh charts, that there is a possibility that it could just straight rug.
And that's one thing that I think will draw in a lot of big money that's wanting to chase beta is they'll say, okay, Solana it might not pull a 10,000x like some new project, but at least I know I'm not going to zero.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's sort of like, I like to put this analogy of, okay, you have a 5-star hotel, right? You've stayed there a couple of times. It's been nice, but then you've had a couple of bad experiences. You want to try at a new hotel. Go into the new hotel. You had a good couple of first days, and then you go back to your room, and everything is just hijacked. Someone just stole everything, and then you think to yourself, "Man, I could have just stayed at my usual hotel. I know the pricing. I know the people there. They've made some nice renovations or whatever." I like that, right? Sort of a weird analogy, but I kind
no,
of
I
like
like
to
it.
put my
I
own
like it.
twist to it, right? So Solana is as I said, right? It's gone through a story. It's gone through the rise and the downfall of the people that were really loud about it. In this case, SBF and FTX on all those individuals. But it's a story that's in the progress. And what people love in these markets is a story. They like the Phoenix. They like the rise from the Phoenix. And I think Solana might be that telltale sign. And well, I
It's
know we're
been
talking.
about as bad as it could possibly be for them as
Yeah,
well. I mean, they went through, hell. They went through horrible, horrible conditions, and they have come out the other side. Their price hasn't recovered too much yet,
yeah,
but you don't have to worry about them giving up on it at this point, you know?
yeah. And one thing to mention as well with Ethereum, towards the end of that bear market, a lot of those ICOs that raised in Ethereum, they sold their Ethereum on the open market. And in 2017, the main use case for Ether was to fund these ICOs. You would send your Ethereum as an individual to a smart contract address, and then you would receive a batch of tokens at a certain time period. And then that ETH that you gave the project, they're supposed to use it for the project. But instead of that, most of them just literally gambled it away on the market. There were a few projects that actually tried leverage trading their treasury and went to zero. And at that point, at the lows of Ethereum, people were wondering, what's the use case of Ether outside of ICOs? So now people are asking, what's the use case of Solana without Sam, right? It paints a story.
Do you think that Solana needs a new face?
I think the face is the story. The face is the story, and Doge had a story as well, right? The devs of Doge, they sold their Doge for a Corolla, right? Then it became a community project, right? So
Yeah.
there's many for Sol, but either way, these are my final words. Either way, Solana is going to paint a beautiful story. And what people love the most is an entertaining story. And that's why you guys are here enjoying this video. So if you like this video, go ahead and smash that like button. If you're new, go ahead and click that subscribing button. My name is Wabi, and I'm here with Max. And today we compared Solana with other projects from other cycles, and we've entertained the prospect of how Solana might perform in the next cycle. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We hope to see you guys on our YouTube streams and on our Twitter Spaces, X Spaces. We'll see you all later. God bless you all.